Welcome to Digital Designs Podcast. I'm your host, Muhannad Jarrah. INJAZ podcast talks about education, entrepreneurship, and technology. Before we start today's podcast, which will be about women entrepreneurship, I would like to give you a background about why we are doing this. INJAZ is hosting 13 MIT instructors who delivered a 3-week bootcamp on STEM, Python, and technology. And this was followed by Destination Imagination experts who delivered a 3-day bootcamp on innovation. And the last 2 days, MIT also delivered training on mentorship and also worked with our women-led startup at my startup in INJAZ. Through this podcast, we get American minds talking to Jordanian minds and exchange culture through digital designs. Today, we have 2 special guests. Mr. Kent Summers, who flew all the way from the US to be with us and to conduct and run a 2-day workshop here at INJAZ with mentors and women-led startups who are hosted and incubated in INJAZ. And also we have Samia Sharawi, who also an entrepreneur who started 2 businesses and very successful, and we want to talk more about it as a female co-founder and running very successful businesses. Welcome to INJAZ podcast, Kent, and thank you for being with us in the last 2 days.
Mohammed, thank you.
You are welcome. First I would like if you can tell us more about what was the training about yesterday and today, and if you can take us through what was going on.
Yesterday was really to help reinforce the practices of team mentoring with the INJAZ program, the My Startup. The program started in 2017. I came over here then to train the initial cohort of mentors in the program, and the program has grown since then. And I was asked to come over a second time and to help refresh the existing mentors as well as to train the new mentors in the MIT VMS team mentoring practice. So I spent a whole day doing that, and it was a lot of fun. We had a room full of people that were all very enthusiastic about volunteering their time to educate the next generation of business leaders here in Amman. So that was lots of fun. And today was a group of women-led founders of startups here that are just joining the My Startup mentoring program. So we spent the morning really sharing part of what I teach at MIT and the B2B sales for startups, just hopefully giving them some tools, some insights to help them get off to a better, stronger start with their new companies. In the afternoon, helping them understand what they can expect from the mentoring program and how they can get the most out of it.
What's your thoughts about the mentors that you talked about and you trained? Anything you'd like to share, their inspiration, why they are volunteering to be mentors? Any thoughts there?
I mean, they're similar to mentors all over the world. We have 129 programs in 23 countries now. And mentors, great mentors are everywhere. They're just hiding. And when you create a program that re-engages them and gives them an opportunity to learn about what's going on in tech and to share their wisdom and experience with the next generation of business leaders, they find a way to volunteer their time, and it's so much fun. So a lot of the training is really helping them understand how to benefit from being a community in a very special, prestigious program that's doing something important in your community. And of course, they bring with it all of their shared experiences in different industries and different professional practices and so forth. So when you put them together with young entrepreneurs, great things happen.
And going to you, Samia, and I was talking to you just before we started, and you are a serial entrepreneur. You started 2 businesses so far, 2 startups, and as a female co-founder, Tell us more why you are starting these businesses and what's behind this positive energy of being an entrepreneur and as a female.
The purpose of starting entrepreneurship or a business in the Middle East, particularly, or third world countries, is to give your country a chance to become economically sustainable. So our motive as entrepreneurs is to start like generating revenues and start bringing the outside money in rather than being dependent on just buying or being the buyers. So our mission as entrepreneurs or as Jordanian entrepreneurs is to start building and to start creating local products. And this is actually what my biggest motive to start.
As a female founder, I mean, what's your thoughts, to other young females who are thinking now to start and being an entrepreneur?
I'm not gonna lie, it's a bit challenging. A lot of times you go like, okay, so I'm not sure if I want to do this anymore. A lot of times there are many jobs, opportunities that are easier, that are more sustainable, that are more stable. But at the same time, there is always this motive that tells you if you want to do something different, if you want to have your own thing, if you want to build something that you're going to see in the future, then entrepreneurship is definitely your option. So I want to say to all women entrepreneurs out there, just seize your opportunities, just do it. Just like maybe if they want to first financially sustain, then they can like save some money first. They can have their own jobs and do it on the side. But once they're like able to start, then nothing should stop them.
Kent, you also are a serial entrepreneur, and I understand that you started, I think, 4 or 5 businesses. Can you tell us more about your journey with startups and what are your thoughts, good practices you'd like to share with us?
I've been part of 5 startups my whole career. 3 as founder and CEO. And it was really out of necessity because I'm a really bad employee, right? I mean, I'm basically unemployable. I don't like working for other people. I had to kind of find my own way. And I'm always interested in creating something new. I've always been very creative and thinking about solving problems in a different way. So I cut my path very early and just out of sort of happenstance picked up computers very early in college. So when I was going through university, it was just about the same time that the personal computer was being introduced into the marketplace, and there weren't any before that. And so I got very, very curious about this personal computer thing, and this was pre-Windows. So I had this thing torn apart in pieces and just really got very curious about how this thing worked, and it just got very involved. And by the time I got out of college, I was an expert in personal computers and at the time MS-DOS and basic programs that were very new and novel to the corporate environment. So my skills were very much in demand. My first job out of college was actually on the program trading desk on Wall Street on Bear Stearns, where knowledge of computers and how they work was pretty essential. I had no business being there, of course, but I knew about computers, and I stayed there for about 2 or 3 years and was recruited to a software company that started up out of the computer science department at Brown, doing this thing called a browser. And this was, again, before the internet, and it was very interesting to me. It was the how to digitize data and share it on at the time, a CD-ROM and a Novell network. And it seemed very cool. So I joined that company. It was bootstrapped, no financing. And we grew that company over a 5-year period to about $16.5 million. And we were acquired by a public company in '96. And it was so much fun. I mean, the relationships I made, we built sales channels in Europe. I mean, it was just a blast. And at that time, the internet had become legit. It had popped out in '94, '93. And we had a browser that didn't work on the internet. So we were happy to sell that to somebody. And then I got about the business of starting doing startups on my own as a founder. And over the following 8 years, I started, ran, and sold 3 software companies, all just cutting edge, new stuff. And I think I was more the benefit of good timing than being smart, because at the time when the internet first started, it was the great land grab. Everybody was going after something, and it really didn't have to be proven to be valuable. So it turns out my companies were acquired more on speculation than they were on proof of value. So I just got lucky in that way, and I sold my last company in 2002.
So 2002, now I'm sure you're thinking to also start a new business. It's been a long time since you started one. Any thoughts, or you think that's it?
Well, so that was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I took a year off to rest, and I started volunteering my time at MIT in the program called Venture Mentoring Service, which is the origin of the program that's being practiced here, back when the program was very, very young. And we shaped and grew and improved that program over a number of years. And it was, I like to say I was tricked into volunteering my time because I had never volunteered for anything before. But it's the most fun and one of the most satisfying things I think I've ever done, is helping other entrepreneurs pursue their journey and help benefit from experience that I could give them. So that was 21 years ago. And 10 years ago, I volunteered to travel around the world and train other organizations in the VMS team mentoring method, including a trip here. And I find also that's very, very satisfying. I've also been doing my own sort of personal consulting practice, and I really shy away from calling it a startup. It's more of a lifestyle business. If I wasn't really, really enjoying it, I wouldn't be doing it.
That's the most important thing, to enjoy.
I've reached a point where my passion and my vocation are perfectly aligned.
Going to you, Samia, and today you told me about your current startup, and it's very impressive.
Yeah.
Can you tell us exactly what you are doing in this, ProFounders?
So ProFounders is technically the first Jordanian startup that's gamifying education. So we have now a board game, which is similar to the concept of Monopoly, but at the same time, it has an educational value and skills. And it's also hybrid, so there is this tool, and at the same time, it's connected to a screen where the instructing video follows on the entire gameplay. So this is only the first step for us in ProFounders. We want to have this platform where you can subscribe and log in to have multiple different games. So technically, we don't sell this game or this tool to individuals. It's a B2B business. So we rather have specific solutions to institutes, whether they were schools, universities, or even corporate. Our first client actually is in the entrepreneurship field, and they're one of the incubators here in Jordan. But this is what we're doing now, and you know how startup goes, like we have to do it a step by step. So we're in the early stages, we can say.
Oh, well, that's great, Sami. And looking at the business incubators in Jordan, do you see the incubators are supporting youth startups, and they are giving these incubation services as you as a youth and a women-led startup wants, or do you have any other thoughts on that?
Actually, what I think of is that from a perspective of the education, the spaces, the facilities, the mentors, they're doing really good job, and they've been helping us to be here today. They're, especially my startup from INJAZ, they're the reason that I could come over many struggles and challenges that I've been through. But to be honest, on the other hand, from a financial perspective, we don't really get much help. There are many institutes and entities in Jordan that provide funding, but at the same time, there are very limited opportunities and very limited seating. And, it does not fulfill the need of entrepreneurs in Jordan, unfortunately. So from a financial perspective, I'd have to say no.
Kent, we were talking in the morning when we I met you in the morning, and we're talking about learning from mistakes and how entrepreneurs learn from mistakes, and how they should look at as an experience doing a mistake and learning from it, and maybe some cultures are okay with this, some cultures think differently on this. So from your perspective, being involved in more than 5 startups and your journey, how do you see the concept of learning from mistakes? Do you have any thoughts on this?
Experiencing failure is it's an essential ingredient to the success of any startup. It's how you manage in your mindset around failure that makes the difference between whether you throw the towel in or whether you keep pursuing your vision. And if you view failure as an opportunity to learn and make a change and adjust and try something new, that's a certain path. If you view failure as a block to move forward, that's another option. So very few startups, even in my own experience, you never get it right when you start. You have a concept, you have a theory, you practice your theory, you test it, you try different things, and certain things work, certain things don't, and you tend to eliminate those things that you learn that don't work and repeat the things that you do. And eventually, through trial and error, you eventually find the recipe to revenue and the recipe to customers. So failure is an essential component of successful entrepreneurship, and it really is a matter of your mindset and how you think about that. At MIT and VMS in particular, we educate and train the entrepreneur and their skills, who in turn build a strong company with those skills. We don't mentor the company, we mentor the entrepreneur. So worst case scenario, and let's be candid. Startups is a high mortality sport, right? A small percentage actually grow, into something that's sustainable. In our world as an educational institution, we may have a failed company, but we have a stronger entrepreneur who's more likely to succeed in their next venture because they've built a much stronger skill set and understanding of how to build a company.
And in the US, the culture there, does it support, doing mistakes and learning from mistakes? Do you see that the US culture, the entrepreneurship ecosystem, support that kind of mindset?
Well, listen, nobody likes to fail, right? I mean, it's disappointing. But there's a big difference between being disappointed and fatal, right? If you view it as just, okay, it's a roadblock, how do I get around it? How do you get over it? Right? And the entrepreneurs that succeed tend to figure out a way to navigate around and over and through those barriers that otherwise would stop, mere mortals. So it's just understanding that that's just part of the challenge of being an entrepreneur, is how to pursue something and make those changes based upon learning, asking the right questions, learning from those failures, and adapting and making the necessary adjustments.
Yeah, I think you are right. I think also there's a difference between learning from mistakes and failure. And these are, I think it's mostly learning from the mistakes, and that's the most important thing. And not to fail, but if you learn from the mistakes, you can.
Yeah, in our mentoring program, we don't pick winners. And the reason we don't is because we wouldn't be doing the mentors or the mentees, the entrepreneurs, any favors, because what they look like when they leave our program is running and operating companies is very, very different than what they look like when we first met them. And if we were to judge them on the merits of what they look like when they join our program, we wouldn't be helping them. So we are not a business plan competition, right? We don't judge whether we think it's a winner or a failure. We've been surprised so many times by what these companies and what these founders do in their journey of being an entrepreneur and what they look like when they leave our program versus what they look like when they came in. Very, very different. So you have to suspend the temptation to judge a company and really what we look like. We look for two things. We look for an entrepreneur who is committed to build a company. They've jumped off the cliff. They are committed, and you look for an idea that's viable. Something that looks like it may. It's something that you can work with, that you can shape a company, and that founder is coachable. And if those three things exist, you can build a company out of that.
Sam, you started your second business and talking about learning from mistakes. Do you like to share anything that you learned from mistakes you have done in the first startup that you learned in the second startup, or your thoughts on this?
Okay, so I'm laughing because we make plenty of mistakes as beginners. Like once you want to start with this journey, you keep putting yourself in mistakes that you can't even realize how severe they are, how severe the injury is going to be like. So I have to say that if you're not resilient enough to get back every time you fall, then you're not supposed to even consider business as pursue as a path. So yes, I've done so many mistakes, like countless mistakes, and you just have to learn. Like you just have to adapt. You just have to start over again. When you can think about it, one thing which is funny that I'd like to share is that I'm 26 and I'm already bankrupt. So one of the things that I could do is go home and cry or look for a loan or find a job. But at the same time, I still have this option of starting a business, starting another business, fixing my existing business. So yes, you have to learn from your mistakes. Yes, you're going to fail. And if the only way to be successful is to fail multiple times. And as much as our community does not support the idea that people fail, as much as we're used to see people's success on social media and nobody shares their failing stories, what's behind the scene is that every single one of us has failed at least once. So yeah, we have to learn from our mistakes, definitely.
We were talking about, being agile and we talked about to fall in love with the problem, not the solution.
Yes.
And that was an interesting thing, looking at it from even design thinking perspective, and how to be agile to find new solutions or different solutions. Can you tell us more about this? What's your thoughts on it?
Well, agility is just your readiness to make rapid changes, right? When you're a small company, you can do that. Right, you can move swiftly, and that's your advantage over larger companies. But in terms of building a solution, people say, "Well, where do you get the idea from?" Well, all ideas stem from a problem, right? So you find the problem, right? You start with the customer's problem, and you work your way backwards toward a solution. So when you think about a new product, it's really falling in love with the problem in all of its dimensions, right? All of the problem itself. And if you really understand that problem well and you work your way backwards, you can find a solution to that problem. Maybe that solution's unique. Maybe it's better, faster, cheaper than what's out there. And in that case, you might be in a position to start a company around that. So it's really, start with the customer's problem, work your way backward toward a solution, not starting with what you think is a potential solution and developing it, in isolation. Whiteboards can't talk, right? So the sooner you get engaged with prospective customers, and really understanding that problem, the better off you'll be, and the higher likelihood that your product actually solves a need in a way that the customer finds is acceptable.
And thinking about design thinking, and you mentioned that today you started with that kind of thoughts, how to put the human in the center of finding the problem, and to be have empathy for that using design thinking methodology. How do you use design thinking in your trainings and teachings, and any thoughts there?
I think there's quite a few programs around this that have adapted the concept of design thinking in many different ways in order to de-risk, starting a new company. It's all about investing time with the customer first in the problem, not the solution, and finding out the facts behind the problem, and doing it over and over and over again until you start to see a pattern where you know that if you solved a certain aspect of the solution, you've addressed a need for the market majority, and you have done your primary research that you can take back to the lab, to your developers, to whatever it is, and say, if we built this, I've already gotten commitment from some customers. They would purchase it because it solves the problem. So you're basically de-risking it by investing much more time up front with the customer rather than going off and coming up with some idea that you think is going to be great, but it's really in isolation of feedback from the marketplace.
I'd like to add on that we built our pro-founders game based on design thinking. So whoever is going to play the game, whether they were students or employees, they go first through the customer research. So it's a customer-centric approach, okay? They try to empathize with where they shop, what are their requirements, what are their pain points before the ideation phase. So because we really believe in the design thinking process, I've been into one of my failures projects because I was always focused on the solution. And I've never thought if anyone wants to purchase my product. And that was when we learned, me and my co-founder, that for anyone to start their business, they have to understand that whatever you want to think of, you have to empathize first, and you have to be customer-centric. So one day when you're going to play my game, you're going to be able to relate how customer centricity is like the basic of going through the ideation phase.
And Kent, my understanding that you do run a training program on business to business B2B, and can you tell us more about that?
It all started at the MIT VMS program, where I was getting pulled into lots of mentoring meetings around the topic of sales and customer adoption and revenue models, and how do you make revenue? In my experience doing startups, there's only two things you really care about, and that one of them's revenue, right? So it all started in sort of a casual workshop, and 2 years later that turned into an IAP course at MIT called B2B Sales for Startup Founders. And the trick there is to teach technical founders how to convince customers to part with their checkbook without feeling like a salesperson. Right? Right. Nobody likes to be sold to, but lots of people buy. Right? But nobody likes to be sold to. So how do you do that? So I learned this through my own experience as a founder, is how to be successful selling to customers without feeling like a salesperson. So I've been teaching that course at MIT now since I'm in my 16th year. And in 2018, I made the decision to take that course outside of academia into business accelerators and incubators. So I started doing that to benefit founders, outside of Harvard and MIT and so forth. So I've been doing a lot of traveling since 2018 with a 5 half-day workshop. And all the founders show up, and they all look the same. They're the same everywhere on the planet, right? They're all brilliant, and they're motivated. They made a commitment, and they're struggling with sales, basically because they have some misperceptions about it, but mostly they've never learned formal sales practices. They don't really understand how it works. So I give them a framework. I give them techniques, tools, methods, things that work for me in the past and that I've learned over the years, mentoring, hundreds of companies, what works, what doesn't work, mostly through failure. And I get a lot of satisfaction over sharing that with entrepreneurs and helping them get their checks from their customers.
Kent, when do you think is the good time for a startup to be open for investor to buy some stock options or part of their company? Because some entrepreneurs, they are so attached to their company and they don't want to sell it, and some entrepreneurs are more open to that. So where do you strike that balance, that you start to entertain more merger or acquisitions or someone to buy more equity in your company?
Well, that's a great question. So first of all, I'd like to say that the barrier to starting a company today is much, much lower than it was even 10 years ago and especially 20 years ago. So the cost, especially a high-tech company, if you're doing software or something on the internet, the tools, everything is just so much more accessible. The big network is out there. The tools are out there. Everything is simple. You don't have to hire a rocket scientist anymore to build a business on the internet. So in terms of the level investment you need to pursue a software company or an internet company or service company, the barrier to that is so much lower today than it was, even 10 years ago. In terms of raising capital, you always have to make the decision as to what dilution you're willing to accept in terms of the capital that you need in order to continue growing your company. And if you make the decision that you do need capital, you need to accomplish certain milestones, growth milestones in your company to prove to investors that you are going to make good use of that capital. You're capable of executing. You've got a team, you've got a product, you've got customer focus, you have a repeatable revenue model. In other words, you're raising that money to accelerate the growth of your company. And if you can convince investors that that's the case and that there's going to have a reasonable return through some liquidity event, in most cases through M&A or acquisition, then you've got a pretty good chance of raising money, and you're going to own a smaller part of a disproportionately larger company. So, I'd rather own 70% of a $50 million company than 100% of a $10 million company, for example. That's how the argument goes. But each situation's a little bit different, and a lot of people waste valuable time trying to raise money too early and from the wrong sources. We always encourage entrepreneurs to look for those non-dilutive sources of funding. What are those grants? What are those? There's lots of things that the government and private institutions make available, even industry. They have contests. Take advantage of as many non-dilutive sources of funding as you can until you've built enough momentum in your company that you're going on the offense. And when you're going on the offense, you're much more likely to get a more healthy valuation for the raise that you make, and you still maintain. It's not so much the percentage of your company, really. It's the control over your company, right? And you don't want to lose control over your own destiny. So you have to be very careful of who you raise money from and how much you raise, especially at various stages of growth in your company.
Samia, I would like to listen your thoughts on this. You have lived this, and you got some investors and some of the startups. So what's your thoughts on when is the right time to seek funding and to get more investors? Kent mentioned sometimes you can go for governmental grants, and sometimes you go the right time to find the investor and the right investor. What's your thoughts?
Okay, so what I really think is that as an entrepreneur should not be attached to the equity that much if they want to grow. So like the mindset of I want to hold the entire shares of my company and it not going anywhere is not the smartest. a lot of times you just need cash, you just need liquidity. And if you don't have that, you're not going to be able to grow, you're not going to be able to hire, you're not going to be able to scale. So what I really think is that I completely agree with Kent. First of all, it depends case by case. Secondly, for example, now at ProFounders, we're at the stage where we're ready to get some investments because we're in a stage where we need cash and liquidity. So our approach for that is that we try to go for investors, for pre-seed investors or seed fund investors that can give us the right amount of cash that we need at the same time not acquire a lot of our company. So it's just the balance between how much you need for every stage. So in my previous startup, we had an offer of a really high payment from Saudi who wanted to control the company, and we had to reject it. Although we really needed the money back then, but we would have lost our entire company and our entire control. So it's literally case by case. It depends on the founding team. It depends on the product. It depends on the environment that the startup is at right now. We had a funding opportunity from an entity in Jordan, and it's gonna help us like grow until a certain stage. But once our product is ready, once we have some recurring customers, once we figure out our product market fit, yeah, we definitely would go for investment.
I'd also like to talk about equity as a tool for growth, not just something that's a function of dilution and control. And something that I see is very different in the U.S. than I notice in a lot of different places around the world. In the U.S., equity is used as a tool to recruit and retain talent. So it's expected that you carve out a certain percentage of your company and put it in a pool of options that you use as a tool to attract talent to your company, and it helps to offset cash. So you can provide equity in lieu of cash. So cash is king when you're early. So if you can give people equity instead of cash, that gives them an incentive to stay with the company because that equity is vested in the company over a certain period of time, typically 3 or 4 years. So equity is an essential tool to starting and growing a company in the U.S., and the founder uses that as a tool to minimize the cash burden on the company. When I go to Europe and other places, I don't see that. I see it. They keep it. All the founders keep 100% of the equity, and I don't understand why they don't use that as a tool, right? As a way to compensate and incentivize people, and it creates a great deal of alignment amongst employees because everyone feels like they're a partial owner in the company, and they show up and they're much more enthusiastic about the company. So it's one of those things that I've noticed is very different than the way that we manage equity at early stage companies in the U.S. versus what I've seen in other places around the world.
So we have the ESOP option, which is the employees shared. Yeah, we have that option, but it's a bit more challenging to use in countries that are not as developed, because usually employees look for the highest pay. So if you, for example, it's from my experience, I had this employee who had shares in my company, and we had this contract that she would have to stick around for a few more years. But once she could get an offer that was double the price that I could pay, she was like, okay, so I don't want my ESOP anymore. So we have the need for the highest paying, that's one. And two, we don't have the mindset of owning assets in Jordan or in other areas. So people don't see the value of having shares or assets in companies, and this is why we don't use it much.
Well, there's lots of examples in the U.S. where people realize the value of those shares, and it makes it easy for people to appreciate that. Because when you see somebody cash out and they buy a house, they change their life, or certainly you read all the stories about generational wealth, that comes from equity.
That's true.
Right? Changes to your life don't come in the form of salary. Salary keeps the lights on, right? They buy the gas, they buy the food. They don't change your life, right? Equity changes your life.
But it's a mindset. Like, if people understand how assets change your life, how pursuing assets instead of like just having liquidity or using the money for every day, it's just like a mindset. So if you could incorporate the mindset of owning in the lives of Jordanians or of people around the world, they would appreciate equity more. They would appreciate owning owning assets more.
Kent, you are also an angel investor. Can you tell us more about when do you make the decision to invest in this startup and what you look for and how's the process?
Angel investors are typically the first money that you raise if you don't include friends and family. After you've exhausted hitting up, everyone in your family, you go to angel investors. And angel investors these days use what's called a safe note, a simple agreement for equity, right? It's a founder-friendly way of raising money. And what's interesting or valuable to founders is it's not priced, right? It doesn't put a valuation on your company. It just it's got a coupon or a discount to your first priced round where they actually establish a valuation. So they're giving you money in the hopes that if you sell the company or you do your first institutional round, they're able to continue that investment in the company at a significant discount to the current valuation of the company. So angel investors have become increasingly sophisticated over the past 10, 15 years, and some of their terms look similar to terms that you see in venture capital companies right now. They're increasingly sophisticated, and they work in mobs, groups of angel investors, right? And they all get together and they evaluate opportunities and they do their due diligence and they all decide. And they have a little bit different governance and how they manage the money, but at the end of the day, they're an option for founders that feel like they need money. This kind of money is more out of necessity rather than out of growth. In other words, they've run out of capital. They need to continue running their company. They need minimum rent and minimum salaries. So angel investment raise there is typically a raise that's made out of necessity rather than a desire to grow the company more quickly.
Well, it's very interesting discussions. I wished we have more time, but I would like to end by saying first to Samia, do you have any advice for women women-led startups? Any advice you would like to share?
Actually, if I had time, I have like plenty of advices. But like for me, two major ones. The first one is that the co-founder matters very sufficiently. Like if you want a good business, you need a good co-founder. A good co-founder is someone you can trust, is someone who has manners, is someone who is straightforward, who cannot like cheat, who cannot lie, who does not want to raise money in any way. So one is have a good co-founder. And the second one is have a lot of patience. Like you just need to be patient and always ready for any opportunity that will hit the door. At some point, whatever effort you're gonna put, you're just gonna find the result of that. Whatever effort you're gonna put, it's just gonna grow, and you're gonna get the fruits eventually. You just need to be patient. So that's my two advices.
Kent, any advice or last thought to entrepreneurs?
Yeah, if you're going to start a company, hopefully you're in a region like Amman or other big cities where they have lots of resources around you, like you do at my startup, where you have resources and expertise and help, and that advice from mentors is worth 10 times more than capital. So if you're fortunate enough to live in a region like this where you can take advantage of resources, find those resources, seek help, seek support, find people that are willing and motivated to help you in your entrepreneurial journey, and you'll find that you're able to get where you want with far less risk and pain than if you were to try to do it on your own.
Kent, thank you very much for coming from the US. I know you had 2 full days and you didn't have the chance to visit Petra, but we really hope next time you'll carve time with us and you have time to see Petra. Thank you very much.
Now, there's so much that I missed while I was here, but next time for sure. And there's so much that I did enjoy while I was here. So
thank you very much for being with us. And Sami, thank you very much for all the insights and sharing your experience with us. To all our guests and the listeners, thank you very much for being us today. And please feel free to leave a comment or share the podcast with your network. And looking forward to seeing you in our next podcast. Thank you.